The announcement finally came. We know who is replacing Charles Kelly at defensive coordinator for Colorado, and it's an interesting hire.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more because today's episode, make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That's what makes it so great. Okay, talking about greatness or possible greatness, we're talking about Colorado's new defensive coordinator hire. Yesterday, Wednesday, Coach Prime teases. There's a text message. It's like, okay, we're cooking something up, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And everyone's like, oh, shoot, we're getting a coordinator. It's a defensive coordinator. It's this, it's that. It's uniforms. And then it's like, okay, it's actually a random supplement announcement, which cool, NIL deals, love them or whatever they are. I don't know. Cool supplement deal. And then it's like, okay, where's the defensive coordinator, though? It's been a couple months now. Well, then in the middle of the day, like it was some random news dump about like him changing shoelaces or him getting a parking ticket. All of a sudden, everyone's reporting that Colorado got a new defensive coordinator. So let me introduce you to the man of the hour, the man, the myth, the legend. His name is, and I'm honestly going to tell you guys, I don't know what to think about this hire, but here we go. His name is Robert Livingston, and he comes from the Cincinnati Bengals, where he was the safeties coach. He's worked there for 9 years, 8 of them in a role where he was a coach of the safeties. So this is kind of the little skinny on him. He spent the last 12 seasons in total with the Bengals, including the last 8 as a secondaries coach, a native of North Carolina. And he also has experience kind of at the college level, not really. He graduated from William and Mary, where he played safety in 2007 to 2009. Immediately after his playing career, he started coaching. He was an assistant at Furman, working with the safeties, and then he worked as a defensive quality control coach at Vanderbilt before being hired by the Bengals in 2012. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, he has quality NFL experience like Coach Prime wanted. It's interesting that it's another secondary-minded guy as Charles Kelly was. And so the question is, what does he bring to the table? Well, a couple of years ago, so 2022, because this past season, the Bengals struggled mightily on defense. I'm not trying to shoot down the hire by any means, but the Bengals, they ranked in passing or in average yards allowed. They ranked 28th in the league with 248 per game, which was only less than the Buccaneers, Chargers, Eagles, Commanders. And then in terms of defensive yards allowed, total defense, the Bengals were one of the worst defenses in the league, I guess in the country. So that's interesting. He did have, according to PFF, one of his safeties was graded as a top 10 safety in the NFL, Jordan Battle, who was a youngster, had a coverage grade of 76.4, had a run defense grade of 81.3. So that's promising. You could see some violent action and kind of productivity by the safeties, which would be a good thing. But other than that, I'm a little interested by this hire. I think realistically, he played it safe on the offense coordinator. I would call this hire a risk in a sense. He has, which I'll get to in a little bit more later, no defensive coordinator experience. I feel like Colorado could have used someone with experience. He also has no recruiting experience. So they finally announced who will be replacing Charles Kelly. I don't know much about this guy because he hasn't had a chance to control his own defense, which I think is a risk. I really do. But that doesn't mean he can't do a good job. He obviously, this was an extensive process for Coach Prime. If you guys don't remember, it has been, actually, I don't know the exact days in my head, but I know on December 30th, that is when the news broke that Charles Kelly was leaving for Auburn. So we are now on February 8th or the 9th, the 8th, and we finally get his replacement. So it's like, it's been a long time coming. So obviously Coach Prime vetted him, did some background checks. I'm sure he talked to the Bengals head coach, Zach Taylor, and was like, yo, what's a skinny? Talk to their defense coordinator again. Like, what's the deal with this guy? I don't know if this was, and I'm not trying to shoot it down again. This is me thinking out loud. Don't think this was the first target. Realistically, Coach Prime said he was going to wait till the playoffs were done. So that has me thinking that initially he was targeting someone who was on a playoff contender or on a playoff team and was waiting until their season was done in the playoffs because the Bengals obviously did not make it. So I'm like, was this option one? Not that it matters because oftentimes we don't really get option ones in life. I think option one would have been like Jim Leonard from Wisconsin, who hasn't taken a coaching job anywhere that I'm aware of. But yeah, I think Robert Livingston, welcome to Boulder. I do think that this hire is somewhat risky, but I'm going to talk about what Colorado needs from him and to succeed. Otherwise, it'll be a flop of a hire. But first, a word from our sponsors. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. You can bet on Gatorade color. You can bet on Reba, whatever it may be. How long is she going to sing? What song is Usher going to sing? Who's going to score touchdowns? Whatever it may be. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a dub or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, or so much more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're doing a special live because I actually had an episode recorded for today, Thursday, and then all of a sudden the news dropped like it was a sack of potatoes, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, here by the way is the new defense coordinator." So I was like, I got to talk about this, got to do an ep about it. But today's episode, later in the day, we'll be projecting who will be the starters for one Mr. Coach Livingston. So let's talk about what Colorado needs in a young defense coordinator like Livingston. For starters. And this is, just what they needed in general. And I think this is a tall task for him. They need better tackling. For one, I don't think Colorado was a very sound tackling team last season. Realistically, they ranked near or at the bottom in just about every defensive category. So he's got a big a big job ahead of him. Now, obviously, one thing that's working in his favor is Coach Prime did him a huge favor, a huge solid, if you will, and got a bunch of talented players on defense. Unlike last year, where Charles Kelly was dealing with a lot of, I don't want to say like scrubs, because they're not scrubs. And I think a lot of people, it's either you're good or you're bad. But I think Charles Kelly was dealing with a lot of guys who will not be starters this year. So you'll see this next on the episode later today, which I want you guys to tune in. It's me and Scott Proctor just shooting the you-know-what, talking about who's going to start. And I think realistically, there will probably, outside of Shiloh, Travis, and make sure I'm not missing anybody, there may be 8 or 9 new starters on this defense. Everyone else that started last year should be a reserve or has obviously left the program. He needs to get the most out of this defense. They need to improve on tackling. They need to improve on overall IQ. I think this defense just lacked certain awareness at times last season. And then discipline. He needs to be, because, and if you're not watching, that was me hitting my hand. We're getting strict. We're rulers on the knuckles type strict, because, and I heard that was a thing with the nuns back in the day. I don't know. My parents ruled. That's what they said. Realistically, though, this Colorado team was one of the least disciplined teams in the country. Travis Hunter themselves, I don't want to say he lost in the Stanford game, but him pushing that Stanford receiver saved Stanford's drive, helped them score a touchdown. I think it was Arden Walker had a late hit against TCU. I think it was also the Stanford game. They had 3 to 5 penalties where it was like, okay, there's 17 guys in the field. What is happening? One of them was after a TV timeout. So there is like a minute and a half for them to figure out who's playing, who's not playing. And all of a sudden, Colorado trots off like 13 people onto the field. And it's like, what is going on? And I don't know if that's something that he really focuses on at the NFL level. Like, I don't think they're like, okay, guys, make sure we all know who's in this package. but that's something he needs to focus on at Colorado. And then also, Colorado, if their defense was good at one thing last year, it was forcing turnovers. And I think he needs to kind of help them continue that, put them in position to be aggressive. I think this Colorado team needs to really be aggressive in stopping the run because the Big 12 has Devin Neal, Taj Brooks, UCF has a good running back. Utah has like 3 running backs that will shove it down your throat. Pause, resume. I apologize. But they're going to run the ball and they're going to do it physically. And so this Colorado team needs to be able to stop the run, and they need to be smart, they need to be disciplined, and they need to be able to tackle, which is a lot easier said than done. It's like herding cats sometimes when I think you take over a new job like this. And so I think realistically, he's got a tall task ahead of him, but Coach Prime sees a lot of potential in this young fella, so why not believe in him? When we come back, I'm going to talk about why I think this could be a good hire and why I think it could be a risk. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at Gametime. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And right now, all users can get $100 off when you buy a big game ticket with the code Vegas100. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you ride. There should be no pole in front of you like at Fenway, or no kind of wall or whatever poor angle, because you get to view your seat, and it's the coolest thing ever. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $100 off a big game ticket with code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code VEGAS, Vegas 100, the number 100, for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We are back, and we're talking about Colorado's new defensive coordinator, Robert Livingston. Is it a good hire or a bad hire? I think it is a risky hire that could go either way. And I say this because let's talk about the positives. He has NFL experience. Coach Prime wants an NFL experience. He thinks the best way to prepare players for the next level, or just prepare players in general, is to do so as they did at the highest level of football, which I totally understand his mindset. And honestly, I have no room to question him. He's one of the best college football players ever and NFL players ever. So he's a Hall of Famer. He has the gold jacket, so he knows a little thing or two about football. So it's good that he has experience. Yes, it is good that he has experience in what Coach Prime wants him to. I think realistically, if Coach Prime wanted to have a linebackers defensive like 7-minded coach, he would have got one. But I think there's something about having a guy that thinks similar to him that may help him. And it also, I think it sets up the other guys to work together easily, because if he's going to be the defensive coordinator, so he calls plays and he's overlooking the whole defense, but obviously he's going to have to communicate with the defense line and the linebackers coach. So I think it's easier if everybody has like their own thing, in a way, if that makes sense. Like he's going to be with the safeties, the FAMU coaches going to be with the linebackers, excuse me. And then obviously the defense line coach is going to be TBD. But they're all going to be working in unison. They're all going to be working together, and it's going to be a great thing. Now, this is where it concerns me. His 2 college stops were 14 years ago. So for reference, I was 10. Also for reference, there was no transfer portal. There was no NIL. Plus, it was at Furman and Vanderbilt. So he doesn't have recruiting or transfer portal experience. He has no college football experience. And so I think that is where the hire becomes a risk to me, because it's like, what about him? And this isn't me trying to shoot it down again. This is just me thinking out loud. What about him stood out to where he's ready to come to the college football level right now? And if he does well, is he going to stick around, or is he going to leave? Is he going to go to a better NFL job? Like, is the goal for him to return to the NFL? Now, obviously, the goal is always for your coaches to get new jobs. Coach Prime wanted Sean Lewis to get a head coaching job. I'm sure he wanted Charles Kelly to do the same. Charles Kelly returned to his alma mater. I don't think there's any beef there. But is this the end-all, be-all for him? Like, obviously, he doesn't want to be a defensive coordinator. So that's interesting. Has he called plays before? And obviously this past season for the Bengals, their defense struggled. So if that was him calling plays, which I don't think it was, what was the issue? Like, what was the issue with the Bengals? I'd be interested to see how in 2022 they were at the top of the NFL in a lot of categories, and then all of a sudden they've fallen off this past season. So what was the issue for the Bengals? And then is he ready to recruit? I don't know. That's a huge question for me. I think this Colorado team needs to recruit more, even if it's the portal or not. I think that could be a risk. But he's young. College players love young coaches. He's probably hip, even if he's not like the most hip guy. He's a young dude, and that always resonates with college football players because they're like, this guy relates to me. He's only 35 or 40, however he is. But I thought this was a really interesting hire. You guys comment below what you guys think. Who were the candidates? That was a good question. I think the candidates were a lot of people in the playoffs that probably either went deep. I think one of them was Raheem Morris, the Falcons head coach now. So I think that was like wishful thinking. But I don't know who the candidates were. I really would love to see like a list of who he was looking after because I don't know. I honestly wonder if this was candidate number 1, 2, 5, whatever, maybe. Not that it matters, but it is interesting. I think it's a risky hire. But Coach Prime is known for giving youngsters in the industry an opportunity. So let's see how this works out. I appreciate you guys for tuning into this live at this early hour. And I appreciate you guys for always making Locked On Buffs your first listen of the day. We're nearing 5,000 subscribers. Would love to get there by Valentine's Day. Make sure to tune in later today at 11:30 a.m. Pacific because I will be projecting all the starters with Scott Proctor. I like what you guys are saying. I think it's a smart move that buffs the limitations on bringing staff and growing the culture. They do need to grow the culture, and I think this guy could help them grow the culture. He comes from an NFL base. But like I was saying, I appreciate you guys for tuning in, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to tune in later today. We're talking defensive depth charts. Tomorrow we're doing offense. You guys won't want to miss it. I will see you guys later.